right, another book for you guys. An Alien Heat, Michael Moorcock. This is the first book of a series that I had never even heard of. Dancers at the End of Time. Fairly old. 72. And my first impression of it was, this was the same kind of, I don't know, sort of drug-addled muddling about that I got through the Jerry Cornelius trilogy. Now, I may have read that one at the wrong time in my life or something, in the sense that I might enjoy it a great deal at this point. In that, you know, the fact that I enjoyed, what's his name? Faulkner, for example, leads me to think that I might enjoy Jerry Cornelius just for the beauty of the writing or whatever, or the muddledness of it or whatever. I'm not really sure. I know with the last Faulkner I read, I did really enjoy the trying to puzzle out what the hell the story was even about. I got the same kind of feeling from this at the beginning, which was I wasn't even sure that there was a story here, much less, you know, that I would be able to figure it out, right? In some sense, it felt like he was just painting this life of decadence of what are, you know, these supremely powerful humans, millions of years hence from now, where their ancestors had built up mechanisms, etc., that allow them to basically do and have whatever the hell they want, and create stuff out of matter, you know, and dissolve it to whatever degree they like, including other living creatures and people and whatnot. And Moorcock is exceedingly good at capturing that sort of that decadent type concept. It runs through a number of his stories, certainly through the Jerry Cornelius, but also through, you know, certain parts of Elric, and I think most of his longer works. I don't really remember it in some of the shorter stories, but you know, when he's describing, you know, these great, wealthy, powerful people, and in Meldabone, it really translates very well. That's probably where I have my most knowledge of his writing. I've always just kind of had I don't know what to think about his writing, because it's very simple and in a way kind of silly. Like, I'm thinking of things like, again from Elric, the ship that sails over both land and sea, and that's like the name of the damn thing. If I haven't played Elric, I think I did. I really ought to, but I think I've covered it already. The game itself is kind of weird too, but it doesn't cover enough to me of the storyline. It tries to translate what it can, but one of the first things, that the main character's name in this may be part of why Jerry Cornelius hits me, is Jarek Carnelian. And, you know, you have Jerry Cornelius, Jerry O'Connell. But there's no sign in this that this is one of the Eternal Champions, at least in this first volume. And like I said, it sort of paints this decadent life, and maybe makes a social commentary on, you know, what having too much will do to a people, in terms of just, you know, making them absolutely, I don't know, dedicated to, is it art? It's a life without suffering unless you choose to suffer, and there are a couple of characters in it who do so. But a story does develop out of it. And one that I found drew me in and was very interesting. Basically, he decides to fall in love. The main character, and decides a number of things, or ponders a number of things, like I'm trying to remember what one of them. One of them is that he wants to discover what virtue is, you know. But that's after he decides to fall in love. There was another one before that, and the characters are all sort of these almost, you know, uninteresting, banal creatures, but seeing the social connections that they have and everything all leads to something very, very intriguing. Just in terms of painting this picture that Moorcock is able to do so. I think he also wrote Gloriana, which was sort of a tribute to Spencer. I enjoyed that a lot. I ended up leaving it with my first girlfriend. And in a way, there was just something about her that linked to that, and that I felt was very appropriate. But yeah, that's another one that I miss. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to see this develop from, you know, it took maybe a third of the book. It's a very small, you know, it's more of a novella size item. It took maybe a third of the story just painting the world, and then maybe a third of it setting up his trying to discover what love is. He's decided he's in love. And maybe actually does fall in love. I don't know. It's very, very, very strange, because he does discover that, you know, the pain, etc., of being separated. But it's almost like it's the pain of not being able to reach a goal that he desires more than anything else when it comes down to it. I guess one of the things that I found very intriguing about this, and I guess it kind of runs through a lot of Moorcock stories, but this one more than anything else that I can think of, at least in terms of how it struck me in this time, in this place, was that this was almost a comedy. It was like a humor book. And I guess that's the thing that I most wanted to outline. A lot of times I read science fiction and fantasy humor books, running from like Xanth and what is it, the Discworld stuff. And all I can feel is that, wow, these are so juvenile feeling. And some of it feels like, well, maybe it's just that they're incorporating so much of this punniness and silly type stuff in it. This has the same kind of silliness in it, but without feeling at all juvenile to me, right? And that's one of the things when you take things like the ship that sails over both land and sea as an example. It sounds so trite and so silly and everything, but in a way, the story just the story and the writing are done from a mature enough level that even though the writing is simplistic in some ways, even though there's a lot that you could say, that you could point to and say, this feels kind of juvenile to me, it really doesn't. throughout the humor throughout this is more a certain absurdity, and the trope that runs through it continuously is just how wrong the characters kind of get anything. So the main character is a student of 19th century history, but this is millions of years in the future. And he just has nothing right. And then also, what little he kind of has right, he blows up and makes his own artistic impressions of. And it ends up absolutely absurd in a certain way. Now, a trope like that can be really overdone or troubling. Another thing that's in it that's kind of intriguing is just sort of the morality of these people. Now, again, they're decadents, right? But within like the first couple of chapters, he's having sex with his mother, who was the first person he had sex with, and several other people within it. And, you know, I mean, it's not like it's puerile. He's not, you know, Moorcock isn't writing pornography or anything like that. It's just, you know, it's obvious that that's what happened. It's enough to make it clear that it happened without, you know, having to go into any details and try to get anybody aroused or anything like that. That's not the point of the story. And again, that's something that I find that Moorcock does very well, is just, you know, breaking all the social taboos, etc., when he's presenting these very decadent, you know, societies. And it's something that I enjoy reading and get a real kick out of, sort of what he explores there. And in a sense, it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't that be okay? Why is it that we have those taboos? And he doesn't go into it at all, right? He doesn't go into questioning it or anything, any more than he goes into questioning or making fun of or really pointing a finger at the absurdities that are present. It's just, this is all different, and all of it brings kind of a kind of snicker to you. It's all very dryly done. And I find that very appealing in a lot of ways. This is one I'm actually going to keep. And my thought is, gosh, I'm curious where the next couple books go. They could just be continuations of this story, or they could be other adventures, because in the end in this story, he has to travel through time back into the 19th century to try to save his love. And it's a very, very enjoyable, the whole way it goes. I would almost regret if it was a continuation of this story. I'm fine with the same characters and everything. I would love to see these characters, especially the main character, being put into other similarly discordant situations, things that just conflict completely with their understanding of reality, etc., as does this travel through time. And I'm not sure I could see a future of this love that he has, you know. But it's really just a wonderful little romp, and I got such a kick out of it that. And it's such a different view on everything. I mean, that's one of the things that Moorcock can bring, is just such a twisted and different view of everything in a way that really leads you to find a lot of questions of our own society, our own morality, and our own assumptions and everything. That, you know, without being at all blatant about it, he's just painting this absolutely different thing in a way that you can completely drink it in and understand. It's kind of funny because Moorcock comes from a period of science fiction, the sort of new wave of science fiction. Zelazny's part of it too, I've always loved Zelazny. Moorcock I was always a little bit more hesitant about, but after reading this, I feel like I probably should pursue more Moorcock. Moorcock! But totally not in a gay way. No, I really think that I should. I really think that I should, because I think that the point that I'm at in my life now, I would be more capable of dealing with some of. So the new wave science fiction writers tended to be experimenting and being more literary and everything. And in some cases, it feels overdone. So, for example, Zelazny, in the Amber series and in a few others, he does this sort of italicized text. With the Amber series, it's when they're traveling through shadow and shifting through things. And I liked that on a certain level, but I think I could maybe drink it in better now. But also in some of the ways when he's describing combat and everything, it's all takes a certain tone that's different from what you would expect in, like, say from the Golden Era or previous, the pulps or whatever. Just in the Golden Era, they wouldn't have touched like going into detail in combat, but he also does it when he's like looking into the mind of an alien. He's giving these alien thoughts and whatnot, and again, that would be stuff that I just kind of glossed over, because what I really loved about Zelazny was his turns of phrase. He could do some really, really clever, humorous things, and some of them I like to put out, like there was one where the main character describes how he knows how to kill the best way to kill a dog if he has to be fighting one, and then he says, well, this was something my father taught me. My father doesn't know much about dogs, but he knew a lot about killing things. And I don't know why, but it just struck me as incredibly amusing to say things along those lines. And there were just, maybe one every couple chapters or so of these little twists that were so beautiful. This actually kind of reminds me of Wodehouse in terms of the kind of humor that's present there. And I know my mother used to always kind of make fun of Wodehouse for being, too silly, too juvenile in its own way. I don't find it such. I actually do find it amusing and don't find that it's overbearing in the way that, like, the couple that I mentioned. Later Zelazny, I remember reading a couple of later Zelazny things that really I kind of felt like he was going overboard with the trying to be too cutesy and funny at the same time. And it actually feels more juvenile than his earlier writing to me. Of course, I would say that, like, later Heinlein also feels like what he went with in his sort of prime was this wonderful explorations, and then he started just making everything one big story, which I didn't like. You could say Moorcock did the same thing with the Eternal Champion and all that. But this was a little different in that he was doing these weird social interactions between these people who were essentially immortal time travelers and all this shit. But also, it just felt like he was getting more and more kind of entering into a 13-year-old's fantasy, rather than touching on the same kind of topics, but in a better sort of way. It just felt like he had become fixated, and this was sort of, his kink or whatever that he was writing all the time. And, again, I don't know if I've read any later Moorcock, but I do know that, to me, science fiction and fantasy, it was science fiction especially. Fantasy may have actually improved, but science fiction in particular got really kind of crappy for the most part around 1980 or so, which, I was big into science fiction at that time. I was reading new stuff and old stuff, and like a lot of the newer writers I was finding were just writing such crap, where it wasn't the Arthur C. Clarke kind of hard science fiction, but it also wasn't the big social commentaries or anything like that. It just started feeling like there were, maybe because of Star Wars or whatever, science fiction just started coming out more and more just sort of like this was somebody's meal ticket. They could write schlock, essentially, and write it quickly and sell it. And then at a later point, I started discovering people who were writing in that period who were decent writers. And Bryn, I think, was one of them. And, oh, fuck, I can't remember his name. I love his stuff. The Ender's Game guy. The name passes me by. Although he has his own issues where he's trying to push politics a little too much, especially in some of his later writings. Which you can make an argument that Heinlein was doing that even in his prime, but that's okay. I think he did a better job of it. Maybe because it just aligns better with what I see. So, obviously the reader is always, can be set off and disturbed by someone pushing a view too heavily. And indeed, I do feel that Heinlein starts doing that later on. He starts pushing it too hard. But not just his fantasy, not just his more sexual fantasies that I think are in there, but they're more like social fantasies of a sort. But anyway, I found this really enjoyable. I doubt that I will hunt down the additional books of the series, but if I see them, I'll sure pick them up. But I would pick up anything by Moorcock anyhow at this point, just if I see it in the little free libraries. Anyway, I guess up it goes.